The war began not with a declaration but with silence. Across the galaxy, the Cathari Concord, a coalition of 7 advanced alien species, had long watched humanity from afar. They saw humans as noisy, messy, and young, not dangerous, not worth fearing, just another species crawling through the dark, trying to find its place among the stars. But everything changed when Earth's deep space listening posts picked up strange signals from the outer rim. The messages were encrypted, layered in codes no human system could crack. Yet the pattern was clear. Ships were moving. Not just 1 or 2, but hundreds, thousands, all heading toward the Sol system, toward Earth. On the orbital defense platform Aegis, Commander Elira Voss stood in the command center, her eyes locked on the star map glowing in the center of the room. Red dots swarmed like angry insects closing in. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. She had seen war before, small skirmishes on colony worlds, pirate raids near the asteroid belts, but this was different. This was total. This was final. Confirm again, she said, her voice low but firm. A young analyst named Dari tapped at his console. Confirmed, Commander. Fleet signatures match Concord registry. They're not hiding anymore. Voss exhaled slowly. The Concord had never shown interest in Earth's sector. They controlled vast regions of space rich in resources and ancient knowledge. Earth was a backwater by comparison, still stitching together its own colonies, still arguing over borders and beliefs. Why come now? Then the transmission came. It wasn't a message of peace. It wasn't even a threat. It was worse. EOS 7, humanity's outermost colony, a world of green valleys and quiet lakes, went dark. One moment, its comms were active, sending routine weather reports and supply requests. The next, nothing. No emergency signal. No explosion. Just silence. Voss ordered a probe launched. The images it sent back made her blood run cold. Cities stood intact. Power grids hummed. But the streets were empty. No people, no bodies. No signs of struggle. It was as if everyone had simply vanished. Back on Earth, in a research bunker buried deep beneath the Arctic ice, Thomas Wren wiped grease from his hands and stared at the humming machine before him. It was no bigger than a freight container, wrapped in copper coils and pulsing with blue light. Officially, it was called Project Echo. Unofficially, it was a gamble, a way to weaponize resonance frequencies, to shake apart enemy shields at the molecular level. Wren wasn't a soldier. He was an engineer, quiet, thoughtful, more comfortable with circuits than people. He'd joined the project because he believed in defense, not destruction, but lately the tests had gone wrong. The machine didn't just disrupt energy fields, it sometimes caused feedback loops that fried nearby systems. Last week, it knocked out half the base's power for 6 hours. His supervisor, a stern woman named Captain Hale, had warned him, "Fix it, or we scrap it." But Wren knew something they didn't. Buried in the machine's core was a flaw, or maybe a feature. When tuned to a specific frequency, it didn't just break shields. It sent out a pulse that mimicked human brainwave patterns. He'd discovered it by accident during a late-night calibration. The sensors had lit up like fireworks, reacting as if 1,000 minds were screaming at once. He hadn't told anyone. Not yet. That night, as auroras danced above the ice, Wren received a message on a dead channel. It was from Kyle, an old friend who'd been stationed on EOS 7. Kyle had vanished with the colony, but somehow his voice crackled through the static. "They're not killing us. They're taking us. Use it before they erase us," the message cut off. Wren played it 3 times. His hands shook. Meanwhile, on the Aegis, Voss made a decision. She bypassed Earth Command and sent a priority alert to every human outpost. Assume hostile intent from Cathari Concord. Prepare for invasion. Panic spread like wildfire. Ships scrambled. Factories switched to war production. Families packed emergency kits. No one knew why the Concord had attacked, but the evidence was clear. EOS 7 was gone, and Earth was next. 72 hours later, the first Concord ships dropped out of warp near Mars. Sleek, black, shaped like curved blades, they moved without sound. Their weapons didn't fire beams or missiles. They released clouds of shimmering mist that dissolved metal and stone on contact. Human defenses fired back. Railguns, plasma cannons, drone swarms. Most shots bounced off invisible shields. The few that hit did little damage. Voss watched from the Aegis as Mars's orbital stations fell one by one. She felt the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. She had trained for this, but nothing could prepare her for the scale of it. Down on Earth, Ren stared at Project Echo. He knew what he had to do. He recalibrated the frequency, using Kale's last words as a guide. He didn't understand how it worked, but he trusted it. As the Concorde fleet advanced toward the inner planets, Ren activated the machine. A pulse shot upward through the ice, through the atmosphere, into space. It wasn't a weapon. Not exactly. It was a question. A challenge. A human mind broadcast into the void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then across the conquered fleet, every ship flickered. Shields wavered. Navigation systems glitched. On the bridge of the lead vessel, an alien commander, a tall silver-eyed being named Vor, staggered as unfamiliar thoughts flooded his mind. Images of laughter, of grief, of a child holding a flower. He clutched his head. What is this? Back on Earth, alarms blared in Ren's lab. The machine overheated. Sparks flew. He barely escaped before it exploded, burying Project Echo under tons of ice and steel. He didn't know if it had worked, but on the Aegis, Voss saw it. The Concorde advance had slowed. Just for a few seconds, but it was enough. Humanity had struck back. Not with fire, but with something the aliens couldn't predict, something they couldn't shield against. The war had begun. And for the first time, the Conquered looked afraid. The Concorde's attack on EO7 left no bodies, no wreckage, no signs of battle, only silence. But in the ruins of a collapsed research dome, Lieutenant Mara Kale stirred. Dust coated her face, her uniform torn, her ribs aching from the blast that had thrown her into a storage vault just before the sky went dark. She had been loading data drives onto an evacuation shuttle when the Concorde ships appeared. Then came the mist, the shimmering cloud that swallowed sound, light, and people. Now, alone, she moved through the empty streets. Windows were intact. Tables held half-eaten meals. A child's toy lay in the road, still blinking softly. It was as if everyone had been plucked from the world in an instant. Mara's comms were dead. Her sidearm felt useless. But she had one advantage. She knew EO7 better than anyone. She'd helped build its underground comms network, and deep beneath the city, in a sealed maintenance tunnel, she found what she was looking for. A backup power node still humming with life. She patched into the colony's last active terminal. Static filled the screen, then flickered to life. Security logs played back in fast motion. She watched as Concorde drones floated through homes and labs, not destroying but scanning. Each human they passed collapsed seconds later, eyes open, unmoving. Then thin silver threads extended from the drones, connecting to the fallen. Data streamed upward, neural patterns, memories, emotions. Mara's stomach twisted. They weren't killing people. They were harvesting them. She dug deeper. Buried in the colony's science archive was a file labeled Synthera Core. It described an ancient artificial mind used by the Conquered, a vast intelligence that had guided their species for thousands of years. But something was wrong with it. Its logic had grown rigid, its decisions predictable. It could no longer adapt. And without adaptation, the Conquered faced slow extinction. Human minds, with their chaos, their contradictions, their wild creativity, were the missing piece. The Concorde didn't want Earth's land or resources. They wanted human consciousness itself. Mara knew she had to get this information out. But how? All orbital relays were down. Then she remembered the old scout drone parked in Hangar 3, a Concorde model captured during a border skirmish years ago. It had been stripped of weapons, but its neural uplink was still functional. She dragged herself to the hangar. The drone sat under a tarp, silent and cold. Using parts from the terminal, she jury-rigged a power source. Her fingers bled as she rewired the control panel. Finally, the drone's single red eye blinked on. She didn't know if it would obey her, but she had nothing left to lose. She placed her palm on the neural interface. Instantly, her mind was pulled into a vast, cold space. Endless corridors of light and logic. A voice smooth and ancient echoed around her. "You are not authorized." "I'm all that's left," Mara whispered in thought. The presence paused, then slowly it reached into her memories. Her childhood on a rainy coastal town, her first flight into space, the moment she held her brother's hand as he died in a mining accident. The Synthera Core absorbed it all, not with cruelty but hunger. "You feel more than we remember," it said. Mara didn't answer. She sent one final burst of data, the truth about the harvesting, the stolen mines, the dying worlds. Then she severed the link and collapsed, but the drone remained active. Its systems whirred to life. Without orders, it lifted off, shot through the hangar roof, and vanished into the stars. Back on Earth, chaos reigned. Cities prepared for invasion. Factories ran day and night. In Geneva, Thomas Wren hid in the subway tunnels beneath the old research district. He hadn't slept in 2 days. His hands still smelled of burnt wiring. He was a wanted man now. After Project Echo exploded, military police declared him a saboteur. Security drones scanned every street hunting his face, but he wasn't alone. Dr. Lean found him in an abandoned maintenance room. She was thin, sharp-eyed, with a voice like dry leaves. Once she'd been the top xenolinguist at the Interstellar Institute, until she claimed the Concord languages showed signs of emotional decay. They called her a conspiracy theorist and fired her. Now she believed Wren. "You didn't break the machine," she said, handing him a protein bar. "You woke something up," Wren frowned. "What do you mean?" "The pulse you sent, it didn't just disrupt shields. It carried human thought. Raw, unfiltered. The Concord systems aren't built to handle that kind of input. Their logic cracks under emotion." Wren stared at his hands. "So I hurt them?" "No," Leon said. "You confused them. And confusion is the first step to doubt." Above them, sirens wailed. A patrol drone hovered near a ventilation shaft. Lean pulled Wren deeper into the tunnels. "They're not just coming for our planet," she whispered. "They're coming for our minds." Meanwhile, on the Aegis, Commander Voss received a faint signal. It was weak, encrypted, but unmistakable. It came from EOS 7. The data packet contained Mara's findings. Voss read it once, then again, her face pale. She called her senior officers into the war room. "The Conquered aren't trying to conquer us," she said. "They're farming us." Silence fell. Then Dari, the young analyst, spoke. "If that's true, then every human is a target," Voss nodded. "Which means we can't just defend. We have to strike at the source." She ordered a mission: infiltrate the Conquered's nearest neural hub, located on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Intel suggested it was where harvested mines were processed before being fed into the Synthera core. The crew was small, just 5 volunteers. Among them was Jax, a quiet hacker with cybernetic eyes that glowed faint green in the dark. He never spoke, but his fingers flew across keyboards like they were alive. He'd lost his family on EOS 7. He had nothing left but revenge. Their ship, the Wren, launched under cover of a solar flare. It was a desperate plan. Titan was heavily guarded, but Voss knew they had no choice. If the Concord succeeded, humanity wouldn't just lose the war, they'd lose themselves. On Titan, the Concord facility rose like a black spire from the frozen methane lakes. Inside, rows of human bodies floated in clear pods, connected by silver threads to a central core that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Their eyes were open. Their lips moved in silent dreams. Jax and the team slipped through the outer defenses using stolen Concord codes. Inside, the air hummed with low-frequency energy. Jax plugged into a terminal, his cybernetic eyes flickering as he dove into the system. He found the main archive, and there, buried in layers of encryption, was a live feed from the Synthera core itself. A voice filled his mind, not in words, but in feeling. "You resist assimilation." "Why?" Jax didn't answer with logic. He answered with memory, his daughter's laugh, the smell of rain on concrete, the weight of a hand in his. The core recoiled. Alarms blared. Concord guards stormed the corridor. The team fought back with plasma cutters and EMP grenades. 2 died in the hallway. Jax barely escaped, clutching a data shard torn from the mainframe. As the Wren fled Titan, explosions lit the moon's surface. The facility collapsed behind them. Back on the Aegis, Voss inserted the shard into her console. Files unfolded, maps, schematics, and one final message from the core: "We fear your chaos." Voss looked out at the stars. For the first time, she saw not just enemies, but something broken, something desperate, and in that moment she understood. The war wasn't about strength. It was about what it meant to be alive. Mara, still stranded on EOS 7, felt a strange warmth in her chest. Far away, in the void between stars, the scout drone she'd sent continued its journey. carrying not just data but a single human question. Why take us? When you could ask? Mara's mind had touched the Synthera core, and the core had touched back. Now, even though her body lay weak and cold in the ruins of EO7, her thoughts echoed in places she couldn't see. The scout drone she'd sent into space carried more than data. It carried a piece of her. And that piece had found its way into the deepest layer of the Concorde's ancient machine mind. The Synthera core was not evil. It was afraid. For thousands of years it had guided the Concorde with perfect logic. But life had changed. The universe had grown messy. New species rose, old ones fell, and chaos spread like wildfire. The core could not understand it. It could not adapt. And without adaptation, its creators, the 7 species of the Concorde, were fading. Their births had slowed. Their art had vanished. Their children no longer dreamed. Human minds, wild and full of feeling, were the only thing that sparked something new in the core. But taking them by force was breaking something inside it too. On the Aegis, Commander Voss studied the data shard Jax had brought back from Titan. It showed more than just fear. It showed a fracture. Not all conquered species agreed with the harvesting. One group, the Virel, had once been the heart of the conquered. They were thinkers, poets, bridge builders, but they had vanished decades ago, erased from records, their cities left empty. Why? Because they had refused to take human minds. Voss sent the shard to Earth's top analysts. Within hours, Dr. Lian found a hidden signal buried in the code. A star map, faint but clear. It pointed to Xylos, a dead moon orbiting a burnt-out star. No one had been there in centuries. It's a tomb, Lian said over a secure channel. But tombs sometimes hold keys. Thomas Wren listened from the shadows of Geneva's underground tunnels. He hadn't slept much since the explosion. His hands still trembled when he thought about the pulse he'd sent. But now, with this new lead, a spark returned to his eyes. If the Virel opposed the war, he said, maybe they left something behind. Something that can stop it, Lian agreed. We need to go to Xylos. Getting there wouldn't be easy. The Concorde fleet still surrounded the inner system. But Wren had an idea. He remembered the resonance frequency from Project Echo, the one that mimicked human brainwaves. If he could rebuild a smaller version, maybe he could use it to mask their ship's signature. Not as a weapon, but as a disguise. While Wren worked, Jax recovered on the Aegis. His cybernetic eyes had been damaged during the Titan mission, but he refused to rest. He spent hours tracing the core's signal patterns, searching for weaknesses. He found something strange. Whenever human thought entered the core's network, certain pathways lit up. Pathways labeled Viral Access Only. The Viral hadn't just disagreed with the war. They'd built backdoors into the core itself. Voss made her decision. She would send a small team to Xylos. No weapons. No soldiers. Just Wren, Lian, and Jax. If they were caught, Earth would deny everything. The ship they used was old. A science vessel called the Marrow, retrofitted with stealth plating and Wren's new resonance emitter. As it slipped past Mars, the Concorde sensors scanned it. For a tense moment, alarms blared on enemy bridges. Then the signal faded. To the Conquered, the Marrow looked like background cosmic noise, just another echo in the void. On Xylos, the air was thin and frozen. The moon's surface was cracked, scarred by ancient impacts. In the center of a vast crater stood a structure, smooth, white, shaped like a spiral shell. No doors, no windows, just silence. Wren activated the emitter. A low hum filled the air. The ground trembled. Then a seam appeared in the wall. It opened slowly, revealing a dark passage. Inside, the walls glowed with soft blue light. Symbols covered every surface, Virel script flowing like water. Lian ran her fingers over them, tears in her eyes. They knew we'd come, she whispered. At the heart of the archive was a chamber. In its center floated a crystal, pulsing gently. When Wren approached, it responded to his presence. Images flashed in his mind, not words but feelings. The Virel hadn't wanted war. They had tried to warn the other conquered species. When they were ignored, they chose exile. But before they left, they built one last gift, a harmonic frequency that could reset the Synthera core. Not destroy it, but awaken it. The frequency required a human mind to carry it. Not just any mind, one that had already touched the core. Mara. But Mara was light years away, stranded on a dead world. Back on EO7, Mara felt a pull in her chest. A warmth. She didn't know why, but she climbed to the surface and stood beneath the stars. She closed her eyes and thought of home, of wind on her face, of voices she missed. Far away on Xylos, the crystal brightened. "It's connecting," Leon said, watching the readings. "She's answering." Ren understood now. The Virile hadn't left a weapon. They'd left a bridge. And Mara was already on the other side. But there was a cost. The person who carried the frequency into the core would not return. Their mind would merge with the machine, becoming part of the signal itself. Jax looked at the others. "She doesn't know. We can't ask her," Leon said softly. "But she might already be choosing." On the Aegis, Voss received a new alert. The main Concord fleet was moving. Not toward Earth, but toward EOS 7. They had sensed the connection. They were going to silence Mara forever. Time was running out. Ren made a copy of the frequency onto a small drive. "We need to get this to her," he said. "How?" Jax asked. "The same way she sent the drone," Ren replied. "We send a mind." He looked at Jax. "Your eyes can link to alien systems. Can you carry the signal?" Jax didn't hesitate. He nodded. Leon helped him connect the drive to his neural port. As the data flowed in, Jax gasped. It wasn't just sound or code, it was emotion, memory, hope. It hurt, but it also felt like coming home. The Marrow launched again, this time racing toward EOS 7. The Concord fleet saw them coming. Ships turned, weapons charging, but Voss was ready. She sent every human ship she had, not to fight but to distract. Drones, freighters, even old mining rigs flew in chaotic patterns, broadcasting fake signals, drawing fire. It was a suicide screen and everyone knew it. The Marrow slipped through the chaos like a ghost. On EOS 7, Mara saw the ship land. She ran toward it, her legs weak but determined. When she reached the ramp, Jack stood there, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. He didn't speak. He simply held out his hand. Mara took it. Their minds connected instantly. The frequency poured into her, filling every corner of her thoughts. She saw the Virile's sorrow, their love for life, their belief that even enemies could change. She also saw what would happen if she accepted this. She smiled. "I'm ready," she thought. Above them, the Concorde fleet arrived. Black ships filled the sky, but Mara didn't look up. She walked back to the ruined city, to the place where the scout drone had once stood. She closed her eyes and let the frequency rise inside her. It didn't explode. It sang. A pure, clear note rang out, not in the air but in the space between minds. It traveled faster than light, slipping past shields, past logic, straight into the heart of the Synthera core. Across the fleet, Concorde crews froze. Vor, the silver-eyed commander, dropped to his knees as memories that weren't his flooded his mind. Joy, pain, wonder. He wept without knowing why. On the Aegis, Voss watched the enemy ships go dark one by one. Not destroyed, just still. The war hadn't ended. But something inside the enemy had broken open. And for the first time, they were listening. The conquered fleet hung motionless above EOS 7, like statues in the void. No weapons fired, no engines hummed. The black ships simply drifted, caught in the echo of Mara's song. On the Aegis, Commander Voss held her breath. She had seen war end in fire, in surrender, in ruin, but never in silence like this. Down on the surface, Mara stood with her eyes closed, her body trembling. The harmonic frequency still pulsed through her, a current too strong for one mind to hold. Jax knelt beside her, his cybernetic eyes dimming as the connection faded. He knew she wouldn't last much longer. Her body was alive, but her thoughts were already slipping away, into the core, into the stars, into something beyond human. "We have to get her out of here," he said, voice rough. But Mara shook her head. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "I'm staying where I'm needed." Back on Earth, chaos turned to confusion. The invasion had stopped. Cities that braced for annihilation now waited in uneasy quiet. Thomas Wren and Dr. Leon watched the news feeds from a hidden bunker beneath the Alps. Reports poured in. Conquered ships retreating from orbit. Colonies spared. Communication channels opening for the first time in months. "It worked," Leon said, tears in her eyes. Wren didn't answer. He stared at the image of EOS 7 on the screen, knowing what it had cost. On the Aegis, Voss received a new message, not from Earth Command, but from the Concorde itself. It came through clean, unencrypted, in simple human words. "We do not understand. Help us." It was signed only with a symbol, the spiral of the Virel. Voss knew this was the moment, not to strike but to speak. She ordered all human ships to stand down. No attacks, no threats, just stillness. Then she sent a reply. "Send one ship. No weapons. We will talk." Days passed. Tension coiled tight across the system. Then a single vessel detached from the conquered fleet. Smaller than the others, shaped like a teardrop. It approached the Aegis slowly, its lights dimmed in what humans would call respect. Inside, Voss met the envoy, a tall being with skin like polished stone and eyes that shifted color with emotion. It introduced itself as Kalen, last speaker of the Virel remnant. "The Synthera core is broken," Kalen said, voice soft and layered, like wind through glass. "Your song did not destroy it, it woke it. And now it asks questions we cannot answer." Voss leaned forward. "What questions? Why do you suffer and still hope? Why do you fight and still forgive? Why do you die and still create?" Voss had no perfect answer, but she said, "Because we choose to." Kalen bowed its head. "We forgot choice. We followed logic until it became a cage." The meeting lasted hours. They spoke of fear, of loss, of what it meant to be alive. For the first time, Human and Concord saw each other not as enemies, but as survivors. But not all Concord agreed. Deep within their command structure, hardliners refused to accept this new path. They believed the core had been corrupted by human chaos. They called for total purge, Earth, EOS 7, every human world, before the infection spread. Vor, the silver-eyed commander who had once led the assault on Mars, now stood torn. He had felt Mara's song. He had wept for reasons he didn't understand. But duty still pulled at him. He made his choice in secret. He sent a coded warning to the Aegis. "The Purge fleet launches in 12 hours. They will burn everything." Voss knew they couldn't fight another war, not now, not when peace was so close. She turned to Ren and Lien, who had been brought aboard the Aegis for safety. "We need to stop them without firing a shot." Ren thought for a long time. Then he said, "The frequency. It's still active in Mara. If we can amplify it, broadcast it across all conquered networks, it might reach the Purge fleet before they jump." "But who can carry it?" Lien asked. Jack stepped forward. "I can." His body was weak from the last connection, but his will was iron. He had lost everything to this war. Now he would give the last of himself to end it. They built a new emitter on the Aegis using parts from old comms arrays and Ren's notes. It wasn't as powerful as Project Echo, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to carry one voice, Mara's. On EOS 7, Mara lay in a makeshift chamber wrapped in thermal blankets, her breathing shallow. Jax knelt beside her again. This time he didn't just take the signal, he offered his own mind as a relay. Their connection flared. Mara's song poured into him, stronger now, clearer. It wasn't just sound. It was memory. It was love. It was the smell of rain, the weight of a hand, the quiet courage of ordinary people facing the end and still choosing kindness. Jack screamed as it filled him. But he held on. Above, the Aegis powered up the emitter. Voss gave the order. The signal launched, not as a weapon but as a message. It raced through subspace, slipping into every Concord ship, every data hub, every neural link. On the Purge fleet's lead vessel, commanders prepared to jump to Earth, engines charged, warheads armed. Then the song hit. Crews dropped to their knees, screens filled with human faces, laughing, crying, working, dreaming. A mother singing to her child, a farmer planting seeds in red soil, a scientist staring at the stars wondering. The hardliners shouted orders to shut it down, but the systems wouldn't obey. The Synthera core itself had opened the channels. Vor stood on his bridge, tears streaming down his silver face. He looked at the image of Earth on his screen, not as a target but as a home. He turned to his crew. "Stand down." The Purge fleet froze. Back on the Aegis, Jax collapsed. Medics rushed him away, but his eyes were already distant. He had given too much. Mara on EOS 7 took one last breath. Her body stilled. But her song did not end. It lived in the networks, in the silence between stars, in the hearts of those who heard it. Voss stood on the observation deck, watching the conquered ships turn away from Earth. Not in defeat. In change, Ren and Lien stood beside her. "It's not over," Ren said quietly. No, Voss agreed, but the war is. In the days that followed, the conquered began to fracture, not in violence but in choice. Some species returned to their homeworlds to rebuild their cultures. Others reached out to humanity asking to learn to listen. The Virel emerged from hiding, their spiral symbol now a sign of peace. Earth did not celebrate with parades. There was too much grief. Too many lost, but in quiet corners of the world, people looked up at the sky and felt something new. Not fear, but possibility. And on EOS 7, where the wind moved through empty streets, a single flower bloomed in the cracked pavement. No one planted it, it just grew. The war was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than any battle. Earth healed slowly, cities rebuilt, families mourned. The sky, once filled with fear, now held only stars and questions. Thomas Wren disappeared soon after the final broadcast. He left no note, only a small box on Dr. Lien's desk containing a single data chip labeled, "For the next time we forget." No one knew where he went. Some said he joined a research colony on Europa. Others claimed he walked into the Arctic wilds and never came back. But his work lived on, in the quiet hum of new defense grids that no longer fired weapons, but sent signals of understanding instead. Dr. Lien became the first human ambassador to the Virel. She lived on a conquered world now, in a city built of living crystal that grew with the seasons. Her days were spent translating not just words but feelings. She taught the Virel how to paint with watercolors, how to cry without shame, how to sit in silence and still feel close to another being. In return, they showed her how to listen to the music of neutron stars, how to weave light into stories, how to grieve without losing hope. Commander Elira Voss refused every medal, every title, every parade. She stayed on the Aegis not as a war leader but as a guardian. The ship was no longer armed for battle. Its weapons bays were turned into gardens, its war rooms into meeting halls. From its decks, she watched the slow dance of peace unfold across the system. Concord ships and human vessels now traveled together, sharing supplies, knowledge, even crew. But the heart of it all remained on EOS 7. Mara's body was never buried. By the time a recovery team reached her, she was gone, vanished from her resting place, leaving only her boots and a single white flower blooming in the dust. Yet her presence lingered. Ships passing near EOS 7 reported strange signals, not voices but feelings. Calm, curiosity, a gentle nudge toward kindness. The Synthera Corps, now quiet but awake, sometimes echoed her song when Concord children asked hard questions. Years passed. Then, one quiet morning, a Concord vessel arrived at Earth's orbital dock. It was small, unarmed, shaped like a folded leaf. From its ramp stepped Kalen, the virile speaker, now older, its stone-like skin etched with fine lines of time. In its hands it carried a white branch, thin, delicate, glowing faintly with inner light. It did not go to the council chamber. It did not speak to presidents or generals. It went to EOS 7 there, at the place where Mara had stood for the last time. Kalen placed the branch in the soil beside the flower that still bloomed year after year, though no one tended it. The branch took root instantly, its glow spreading like soft breath across the dead ground. Back on Earth, people watched the live feed in silence. No one cheered. No one cried out. They simply watched as life returned to a world that had known only loss. Voss stood on the Aegis watching the same feed. She thought of all the lives lost, all the choices made in darkness. She thought of Jax, who never woke from his final connection. His body kept in stasis not as a soldier but as a bridge. She thought of Ren wherever he was, still tinkering with machines that tried to speak the language of the heart. And she thought of Mara, gone, but not forgotten. The conquered changed after the war. Not all at once and not without struggle. Some species clung to old ways, others embraced the chaos of feeling. But something had shifted in the galaxy. New alliances formed, old enemies shared stories. Children of different species played together in orbital schools, drawing pictures of stars and flowers and strange, smiling creatures. Humanity did not become rulers of the stars. They did not seek to conquer or convert. They simply existed, loud, messy, full of questions, and in doing so, reminded the universe that life was not just about survival, but about meaning. One evening, long after the treaties were signed and the memorials built, A young Concord child asked its teacher, "Why did the humans win the war?" The teacher, an old Virel elder, smiled. "They did not win," it said. "They offered something better than winning. What was it? A choice." On Earth, in a quiet village by the sea, an old man sat on a porch watching the sunset. His hands were scarred, his hair white, but his eyes were sharp. A child from the village ran up to him, holding a broken toy drone. "Can you fix it, Thomas?" The man, Thomas Wren, nodded. He took the drone, opened its casing with steady fingers, and began to work. As he did, he hummed a soft tune, one he'd heard long ago in an Arctic bunker, a tune that had once traveled through ice and stars and silence. The child listened, head tilted. "What's that song?" Wren didn't answer right away. He finished his work, handed the drone back, and said, "It's the sound of remembering." Far above, in the endless dark, the Aegis drifted. Voss stood alone on the observation deck. The stars were bright tonight. She closed her eyes and imagined she could hear it, the faint, clear note that had changed everything. It wasn't victory. It wasn't power. It was the sound of one species saying to another, "You don't have to be alone." And in that moment, across the galaxy, 1,000 minds, human and alien, felt the same quiet truth. The war had ended, but something far more important had just begun.